3, 2, 1. Welcome to episode 28 of 1530. Today, as promised, we're going to be going way back, do some throwback matches for you. But before we get into that, we have a stat of the day as normal. So our stat of the day is 4%, and it's 4% better is the number. So Djokovic, Federer, and Rafael Nadal, obviously three of the best players who have played, leading in majors, and that sort of thing. But right now, if you go back and you look at their career statistics, they've all won 4% more matches in majors over their career. That was interesting that it actually ended up being the same number. Rafa was actually 4.4% better, and it was exactly 4% for Federer and Djokovic. So it's amazing how good these guys are always in any tournament, but how they actually raise their game in the majors. Think about maybe a Federer at Wimbledon or Nadal, especially at the French Open. And so it's just amazing that even though they go about their craft so differently, they're all champions, and the statistic happened to be the same, which is interesting. Murray, interestingly, I looked at his, was 3.4%, so good, but just not quite as good as Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. I was kind of thinking about why is this? A couple things I was thinking, there are bigger draws in the slam, so you kind of face easier players early on. You're not going to play someone seeded, assuming you're seeded early on. While in a Masters 1000, you could see someone in the second or third round potentially that's pretty good and get knocked out. So, but I do think there's also something to playing better in majors. I looked up Stan Wawrinka, didn't know what his number would be. His number was 9% better, so actually quite a bit better than the Federer, Nadal, Djokovic. Now, of course, some Masters 1000s he kind of can flame out early, but to me, it just shows, again, he's a big match player for the majors. He really does show up. A lot of times he beats players that he really has no business beating, like a few times he's beaten Djokovic, Federer at Roland Garros, etc. Zverev, right? Alexander Zverev is one that we talked about being not very good in majors. So if you want to take a guess, he actually is better, but not very much better. It's only 0.5% better in majors, which, considering his favorable draws being a seeded player, that's not too good. So hopefully he can improve on that. I thought that was kind of funny. One surprising one was Tsitsipas. I just kind of looked at some random sampling of players. He's actually 6% worse at the majors. So maybe Zverev gets a little bit too bad of a rap. Tsitsipas, I guess, should be doing a lot better. Or maybe on the flip side, I was thinking about maybe he's just really good at best of three format, and he did win the ATP Masters 1000 or the ATP World Tour Finals. So maybe he's kind of exceeded his potential in those and is underperforming or in the majors. So I thought that was interesting, but maybe Zverev shouldn't get such a bad rap when people like Tsitsipas should be going further in the majors according to this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think you have to take into consideration the extra set they have to win as well. Right? Maybe you mentioned this, but I mean, it reduces the variability, right? You have to have a little bit more skill, not as much luck, just to get 2 sets out of 3 off of one of the bigs. You have to get 3, and they have a way of just really settling in there and making you eventually miss. So I think that probably plays a role in it too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Right. It's easier to maybe red line, play a really good set of tennis or 2 really good sets of tennis. You think about you can get a tiebreak off maybe one of these guys, but in order to get three sets, right? Like you're saying, best of 5, you have to be the better player on the day, and that's not always the case for best of 3. I'm thinking about Federer and maybe like Kyrgios when they've played a couple matches where they all of them go to tie breaks. Kyrgios won one in Madrid, Spain on clay, and that was the first time they played. All of them were tie breaks. Kyrgios eked that one out. Federer did the same, returned the favor in Miami, I think a couple years later. But same thing, like they're all tie breaks. I mean, anyone could have won those. But if you go down into best of 5, maybe one of those sets isn't a tiebreak. I don't know. So yeah, very interesting, like you're saying, on the margin there. So transitioning, I first got into this looking at this number because I was looking at Bjorn Borg's numbers, kind of throwback. It was interesting. It seemed like he just didn't have the same, especially second serve return points. They were extremely low, or second serve points for winning them. They were really low. I think what ended up happening, though, is just the ultimatetennisstats.com doesn't go back beyond, I think it's like 1992. So we were missing some of Borg's prime years. But either way, I was like, man, does Borg just not do as well in the smaller tournaments? And does he just do really well in the majors? So he's actually 7% better in majors. So better than the big 3. Not as good as Stan the Man, interesting, but thought that was interesting for Bjorn Borg. So kind of transitioning there, want to talk about Bjorn Borg. You guys probably, tennis fans, at least know the name, see him maybe participating in the Laver Cup, but you probably know he's won Wimbledon 5 times in a row. So Federer ended up matching that feat. We'll also kind of go into that match, but pretty amazing. Him and John McEnroe, among other players, he had a big rivalry with. He was also a player, though, that won Roland Garros 6 times. So pretty unique style of play. Back in the day, this was a time where serve and volley ruled king, but Bjorn Borg had amazing ground strokes. He was able to utilize topspin, and so he primarily played from the baseline. And so kind of a unique player in his day, but winning Wimbledon and Roland Garros back-to-back, especially back then when the surfaces were even more different, it's really tough to do. And you don't have much time now. I guess we have a few more weeks. There's a little bit of more of a grass season, but only 3 players have ever done that. That's Bjorn Borg, right? He's done it several times. Nadal and Federer are the only other players that have done it to win Wimbledon and Roland Garros in the same year, the Wimbledon Roland Garros double. So Bjorn Borg's an amazing player. Obviously, he kind of retired early. I'd highly recommend watching the Borg versus McEnroe movie. I thought that was a pretty good movie showing, the intensity of the sport and how much pressure he was under as world number one. Once he kind of lost that world number one, and he won 5 Wimbledons in a row. John McEnroe kind of ended that streak for him. He just decided to kind of give up on the sport, but still an amazing talent. So the match I want to cover and talk about in a classic match is the match right before that year. So this was 1980 Wimbledon final. So this was one, spoiler alert, this is one where Bjorn Borg ended up winning, but it was a 5-setter. It was a classic. McEnroe was the brash New Yorker, right? A little bit of a tough talker, trash talker. And he was the net rusher, really good at net, really good serve. And of course the graceful baseliner, kind of Bjorn Borg, maybe almost Federer-like in his day. And this was one where he was going for his 5th consecutive Wimbledon. So this was a 5th setter, pretty much an instant classic. And then, of course, the next year, McEnroe gets revenge and wins in 4 sets at Wimbledon and ends Bjorn Borg's 5-year reign. Again, bringing back memories, at least for me, of watching Nadal and Federer's 5-year reign in a row at Wimbledon. That was actually a match, just for the viewers out there, dating my tennis viewing. That's the very first tennis match I ever turned on the TV. I turned it on. It was in the 4th set somewhere, and I watched the 4th and 5th set. This is when I was like, tennis is a pretty interesting sport. And I kind of felt bad for Federer losing, and, the rest is history. But that's a pretty awesome match to be watching. So I kind of want to talk about those couple of Wimbledon matches. But, tennis history decided at Wimbledon. But Matt, any thoughts on those great matches before we get into the numbers?
Nothing specific. Maybe just it's interesting to see. I don't know, there are just specific matches that kind of stick out and kind of form the culture of tennis, the history of tennis. And I think these are some of those big ones that kind of shake the tennis world and kind of leaks out over into even, the world of people who don't follow tennis.
Yeah, exactly.
These are those matches that can bring it into view for a lot of people who normally wouldn't even pay attention to it. Good for the sport.
Yeah, and going to that point, I think this was one of the first years, or first time in a long time, where tennis was actually on the Sports Illustrated. I believe it was Sports Illustrated. One of the big sports magazines. Nadal actually made it on the cover when he stopped Federer's reign, right? 5 years in a row of Federer being the king at Wimbledon, Nadal winning it for the first time, being the world number 1 for the first time. So like I said, people who hadn't even followed tennis really were paying attention to this Nadal guy and maybe wondering if Federer's reign was over forever. And yeah, I think very similar thing happened changing of the guard with Bjorn Borg and John McEnroe. So like you're saying, tennis history is pretty amazing thing. But let's go into the numbers here. So this match really, I guess, just to summarize, just really was a teeter-totter back and forth. Each set was, had a lot of variances. I mean, Borg came out a little bit flat, and McEnroe was playing really good tennis. He actually won the first set 6-1. So a lot of people wondering, well, Borg, is he going to be able to overcome the pressure? Is he going to be able to repeat as champion for the 5th time? So really the numbers that stood out to me in that set where Bjorn Borg had 9% double faults, which if you look at the rest of the sets, the highest he had was 5%, it looks like, or 0% or 2%. So 9% is quite a bit of double faults. So he was getting a little nervous there. both guys did serve fantastic over the match. And then his second serve points won were only 44%. So that's pretty paltry, especially because later in the fifth set, give away another spoiler, Bjorn Borg ended up with 90% second serve points won. So came out a little shaky at the start, I think. A lot of double faults. And then when he'd hit the second serve in, McEnroe was able to attack. So that was the biggest thing. And McEnroe played obviously solid, won the set fairly easily, 6-1. In the second set, you had a little bit of a reversal here. So this one went 7-5, and this went to Bjorn Borg. Borg was able to ace 6%. And that was a number or 8%, excuse me, of his points. And so this is in contrast to 0%. So he had no aces in the first set. So he was really able to up his service game. And he was able to, his second serve points won didn't move that much. They were 47%. But his first serve in went up by almost 6%, 5% here. And then first serve percent for John McEnroe was also pretty good. So yeah, it was a very tight set, obviously 7-5, but Borg honestly, just from the numbers, was able to up his game on the serve, was able to get more aces, which, right, McEnroe was known to have a better serve, but Bjorn Borg was able to back his up a lot better. And he won a very tight set there to even it at one set apiece. Going into the third set, I didn't highlight any numbers that stood out to me really. Interesting that Borg, again, had more aces than McEnroe in this set. Their double faults looked pretty similar. First serve in looked identical. Bjorn Borg was a little bit better on his first serve points won at 71% to 64% for John McEnroe. And also with his second serve points won was 65% for Borg and 62% for McEnroe about. And it's interesting because, yeah, I guess Borg also took that set. So again, the next two sets, you're just wondering, well, like I guess Borg's going to close it out. I don't know if John McEnroe can do it. But the fourth set this was where the match got extremely thrilling. So this was one that was actually pushed to a tiebreaker. So we've seen that at Wimbledon many times before, right? Just like Federer, Djokovic just last year, right? They had 3 tiebreaks. Djokovic won them all, didn't have a single unforced error. The tiebreak's obviously pretty important at Wimbledon. This one went 16 points is what it took to win that tiebreak. So pretty amazing that Borg blew it, I guess, and McEnroe was able to come back. And this one, the numbers that stood out to me a lot, I highlighted 9%, 9.3% ace count for McEnroe. So of all his serves, 9% of them became an ace. That's a pretty high rate there. And Bjorn Borg was only at 2. And John was able to up his second serve points won to 77%, up from 62%. So that's a huge drastic change there. His first serve percentage went down some, but he's going for a lot more aces, so that's understandable. But yeah, and then another thing that's weird is his first serve points won was less than his second serve points won. So don't know much behind that. That's usually opposite, especially on the fast surface there. But yeah, so John McEnroe was able to steal that fourth set, but he served extremely well. And then to the fifth set, which was 8-6, and that ultimately went to Bjorn Borg. So McEnroe ace count went up to 11%, so went even better. But his double faults went up to 4.4%. So he was just going for broke on it, which led to a lot of aces, but led to the most double faults he'd had in the set. Borg's ace count also went up, though, to 6.5%. So not as good as the second set, but still pretty good. And then, like I mentioned earlier, 90.5% was Borg's first serve points won, and 90% of his second points won. So Bjorn Borg's serve just became untouchable somehow. And he was able to win at 8-6. So still, obviously, John McEnroe had to play really well because he pushed it to 8-6, but Borg was not getting broken there based on those numbers. So just crazy how kind of a match teeter-totters. And I think we've seen that in many matches that especially go 5 sets, right? Thinking back to Wimbledon this last year, right? Federer would just, beat Novak at 6-1 in one of the sets, and then Novak come back and force a tight tiebreaker, and then Novak would win the tiebreaker. So I think we see a lot of teeter-totter matches, but this one definitely made tennis history. So definitely watch highlights if you can, do it more justice. And again, I do recommend that Borg versus McEnroe movie. I thought it was pretty well done myself. But Matt, any comment on the numbers there that we presented?
No, I think that you covered it well. Yeah. Nothing to add to that.
Sweet. Okay, well, turn over to you. So I think you have some numbers for us, right? For a different throwback match?
Sure do. So going back to 2001, U.S. Open, we had a quarterfinal match between Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi. These were like, the Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, before Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal were on the scene type of deal. Pete Sampras was the chip and charge. He would serve and follow his serve in, go to the net as much as he could. And Andre Agassi was an aggressive player with super smart tennis player, but definitely more Rafa-esque in the way he played compared to Pete Sampras. Anyway, yeah, so this match went 4 sets. There were, between the two, 9 break chances, but not a single one was converted. And every single set went to a tie break. So obviously super close. Tie breaks always enter a lot more, not luck, but a lot more chance into it. Suddenly you have just 7 points that you need instead of a whole match, or a whole set rather, whole game. But if you look at their stats, I mean, most of them are pretty similar. If you look at their first serve percentage, Andre was at 65.3 and Sampras was at 62.5, relatively close. Sampras won, 5% more of those first serves, first serve points at 79% compared to Agassi's 75. So it's a super tight match. And obviously, looking at these numbers, you would think, okay, well, this probably went to a bunch of tie breaks. And so, yeah, just a super close, you had these two powerhouses that are really going at it and unable to really break into each other's games, taking each set to a tie break. So,
yeah, pretty awesome. I know when they do U.S. Open coverage, sometimes if there's a rain delay or something, this is actually one of the matches of choice that they'll put up on the big screen. And I think for all the reasons you said, right, there's nothing more exciting than a tiebreak to decide the set, even though, I think it gets the crowd more into it. They're definitely, each point is important. And like you said, there's some room for some chance. And even though it didn't go 5 sets, I think this is definitely one of the classic Agassi-Sampras matches. And, just like for you said, they're like the Rafa and Roger of their day as far as contrasting styles. Definitely huge rivals, definitely both winning a decent amount of slams. So yeah, it's cool to see matches that, these guys are this good and they actually keep it that close.
Yeah.
So another one of those tennis history, maybe. And who won that one? Was that Sampras that won that?
Oh, it was Sampras. Yep, he pulled it out. So Sampras was up 3-1. That's not right. He was up 3-1, and I think. Never mind. I take that back. He was up 2-1, and I think Agassi had the lead, or was pushing in the 4th set. And there's an article on the New York Times. They pulled some quotes from Sampras, and he was just talking about how he knew he had to close it out in that 4th set. I guess Agassi was a lot more focused on fitness and training. He knew that if he went to a 5th set, Agassi would probably take it. And so,
interesting.
Kind of interesting to see the mindset of Sampras there as they were getting down into the 4th set there to say, hey, I got to really push here and make sure I close it out. Otherwise, this is going to get away from me. So.
Right. Yeah, interesting. I think we've seen that before as well with some of these players as well. Like maybe Wawrinka is playing Djokovic and he has a chance to close him out. And he's like, I got to close him out in 4 sets. And he did it a couple times, right, at U.S. Open and for Roland Garros, but worried about Djokovic, not only fitness, but just, these great players can come back. They can find ways. So, yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think that's all the stats we had for you guys today. We do want to continue to cover past matches. I think some of the ones we want to talk about are Federer Nadal's great Wimbledon battle, 2008. And maybe we can also talk about the 2007 one where Nadal was also pretty close, pushed it to 5 sets. Some other ones I'm thinking about, maybe reliving Andy Murray's Wimbledon triumphs. He's had 2, perhaps the Olympics. And I also do want to go back to Stan Wawrinka and some of his triumphs, kind of an unexpected player in this era of the Big Four. So, and then any others that Matt can think about as well. We can cover those numbers and give you guys a dose of tennis while tennis is on hold still. But as always, please visit us at cognitionsphere.com, and our theme music is brought to us by Kevin MacLeod with excerpts from his song Cool Rock. And until next time, we'll see you on the court.